To begin showing you how to knit in the round on 2 circular needles, I'm going to first show you a piece of knitting in the round. Could be flat, doesn't matter. But I want you to notice that anytime you work a stitch, knit or purl, you have the stitch with the yarn coming out of it on the right, and you're working into the next one to the left. So keep that in mind as I'm describing the knit on the 2 circular needles, and that should help you quite a bit. So I have 20 stitches cast on to one needle, and the first thing I'm going to do is just slip them, half of them, sorry, onto a second needle. I'm just going to slip them, let's go this way. I'm going to slip them purlwise so I don't twist anything. And I'm just going to put half of them on one and half of them on the other. Okay, so I have half the stitches on each needle. The next thing we need to do, because our yarn is coming out of this stitch here, and the stitch to the left of it will be this one here. In both instances, we need these stitches to be the ones that are on the tips of the needles. So I'm just going to take and slide both these needles down so that the stitches are at the tips of the next needle, or the other end of the needle. Okay, so if you can see this, the purl bumps are facing each other and in, and then they're going to press together. I have my yarn coming out of the back needle. If you're working in the round, that's to the right. The new one is to the left. It's going to be the first stitch here. Now I take the needle that I'm not going to be working on, which is this one on the back, and I will just slide the stitches down so that they're resting on the cable. It just gives a little bit more play to work with. When I'm going to knit the stitches, I'm always going to work with the same circular needle. So I have both ends of this one needle. And for this instance, I have one wooden needle and one metal needle, just so it's easier for you to see that when I'm working on the stitches on the metal needle, I'm always using that other end of the metal needle, and vice versa. So this is the first stitch on the needle, so that's pretty much the only one we can work into, right? I'm going to put my new needle in the stitch as if to knit, pick up my yarn. I will take the tail and the working yarn for the first couple stitches, and that's how I join them together. I think it's the easiest, least fussy way to get a good join, so that's what I do. So I'm just going to knit the first stitch. Make sure you pull it a little bit tight. One stitch, and then I'm just going to continue working across this row. After I have done a few stitches with both the tail and the working yarn, I will drop the tail and just use the working yarn. Now it's important to remember when you get back to these stitches that you have 2 loops on the needle for each stitch, but treat them as one. So I knit 4. When I come back, I still want to knit those as 4 stitches, not 8. So I'm just going to continue across the row. When I get to the end, I now have to continue to go to the stitch that's to the left of the one that the yarn is coming out of, which happens to be this one on the next needle. So I'm going to flip everything around. So again, my yarn is in the back. I'm going to move this, the stitches up on this needle so that they're on the tip, so that you can work with them. You can never work with them if the yarn isn't accessible to the stitch. So I'm going to slip the back one that I don't need anymore onto the cable just for ease of handling. And now that back needle doesn't exist to me. I'm only going to work on this wooden needle. Again, the yarn is coming from the right. I'm going to work into the stitch that's to the left of that. Put my needle in as if to knit. Wrap it around. And I'm going to work, just knit across that row, just like it's any other straight needles, circular needles, just like it's any other anything. Keep working across those stitches real quick. And then I'm going to very continually do the same thing. Work around and around and around. When I get to the end and all my stitches are on the needle that's in my right hand, I'm going to turn everything around. Hold the stitches in my left hand. Bring the needle that I just knit with, the one that the yarn's coming out of, move that to the cable. Bring the needle that I want to work onto, bring that needle up so that the stitches are accessible. And I will start to knit into this next stitch. Now, one thing you want to make sure is that when you're bringing your yarn up to start the new needle, you're going in between the stitches and not getting a loop back here on this back needle. Okay, you want to make sure that it's coming up in between so it's not creating a stitch that you're not intending to, which is not the end of the world. You can always just slip that off. It doesn't really leave that big of a hole. So now I'm going to make sure that when I'm knitting these stitches where I knit the tail and the working yarn together, I'll bring that up real close. You can see that that is 2 loops, but it's 1 stitch. And so I'm going to treat that as 1 stitch. And now when I finish the stitch, I only have 1 loop again. Okay, so that's how you knit on 2 circular needles.